In the quiet village of Ban Fane, nestled deep in the mountains, there was a long-standing belief that death came with the cry of an owl. For generations, families feared the sound of the night bird's sorrowful wail. It was not a normal cry, but an eerie, bone-chilling wail that would send shivers through anyone unfortunate enough to hear it. There was one particular house at the edge of the village that had long been cursed by the owl's presence. It was an old, crumbling structure, passed down through generations of the Pham family. Over the years, the house had become known as the House of Tears, and it was said that anyone who lived there was doomed to lose someone dear to them. The curse began decades ago, when the Pham family first moved in. Legend has it that the family patriarch, an old man named Vang Pham, had wronged a powerful spirit who took the form of a large, terrifying owl. The spirit had been disturbed when Vang chopped down a sacred tree to build his home. Outraged, the spirit cursed the family, vowing that as long as they lived in the house, death would follow. Since then, the owl would come, always at night, perching silently on the roof. Its eyes were wide and unblinking, glowing like two small moons in the dark. Its feathers were black, blending into the night, except for its massive talons, which glinted silver in the moonlight. And then it would begin to cry, a low, mournful wail that grew louder and more despairing with each passing second. The owl's cry was so haunting that it would freeze the hearts of anyone who heard it. It was said that the sound carried the voices of the dead, and with every wail, the souls of those who had died in the house could be heard weeping, pleading for release. The village elders warned everyone to stay away from the house, especially on nights when the wind was still, for that was when the owl would appear. The Pham family, now reduced to only a few members, had tried everything to lift the curse. They called upon monks, shamans, and even Christian pastors, but nothing could keep the owl away. One night, the owl came again. It was just past midnight when Dao, the youngest daughter of the Pham family, heard the soft rustling of feathers above her. She froze in her bed, her breath shallow and her heart racing. Her parents had died years ago, victims of the owl's curse, and now she lived alone, too afraid to leave the house that had been in her family for centuries. The sound came again, closer this time, a soft scraping, as if sharp talons were dragging across the roof. Dao's heart thudded loudly in her chest. She pulled the thin blanket over her head, trembling, but she knew it was futile. The owl had come for her. Then, the cry began. It started low, like a whisper on the wind, but soon it grew louder, filling the house with its terrible wail. The walls seemed to vibrate with the sound, and Dao clutched her ears, trying to block it out. But the owl's cry pierced through everything, through the walls, through the floor, through her very soul. Dao could hear the voices of the dead in the owl's wail. Her mother, her father, her grandparents, they were all there, their voices twisted with sorrow, pleading for release. The owl's cry grew louder and louder until it seemed like the very air in the room was shaking. Suddenly, Dao heard a soft knock at her door. She froze, the blanket still pulled tightly over her head. The knock came again, louder this time. She wanted to scream, to run, but her body was paralyzed with fear. The door creaked open, and through the small gap, she saw it. The owl, larger than she had ever imagined, perched on the threshold. Its massive, glowing eyes fixed on her, unblinking. Its feathers were ruffled and sharp, like black needles bristling in the darkness. The owl opened its beak, and a deafening wail filled the room. Dao tried to scream, but no sound came out. The owl's cry was so loud, so overwhelming, that it seemed to crush the air from her lungs. Then, suddenly, everything went silent. Dao opened her eyes. The owl was gone. The house was quiet, save for the soft rustling of the wind outside. She sat up slowly, her body trembling. Had it all been a nightmare? But then she saw it, a small, black feather lying on her bed. She picked it up, her fingers trembling. The feather was cold, as if it had been dipped in ice. That night, Dao fell ill. Her body was racked with fever, and strange visions filled her dreams. She saw her parents, standing at the foot of her bed, their faces pale and hollow, their eyes filled with sorrow. They said nothing, only stared at her with eyes full of despair. Over the next few days, Dao's condition worsened. No doctor could explain the sudden illness, and soon, she was too weak to get out of bed. The villagers whispered that the owl had claimed her, just as it had claimed every other member of her family. One cold, moonless night, the owl came again. The villagers heard its wail echo through the mountains, louder than ever before. The sound carried on the wind, filling the village with dread. The next morning, Dao's body was found lifeless in her bed, her face frozen in a twisted expression of terror. The Pham family was no more. The house, now empty, stood as a silent reminder of the curse that had claimed so many lives. The villagers avoided it, refusing to even speak of the owl. Some said they could still hear its cry on quiet nights, when the wind was still, and the moon was hidden behind the clouds. And whenever someone heard the owl's wail, they would clutch their loved ones tightly, praying that it was not their turn to be claimed by the House of Tears.